we have tonight is actually, we have presented 4 people. We decided we will add a few more to the mixture. We are going to have some wonderful people who are going to interact with you, who have been there, done that in variety of context and variety of scenarios. So let me start by CAROLYN GABLE. Please, can you come up to the stage? And I'm going to do like a quick 1-minute introductions, and then we will actually have opportunity to listen to them a lot more. So CAROLYN is a person who started out with essentially wonderful richness, her kids, and wonderful opportunity as a single mother, and lot to grow as a waitress, and decided that is not good enough for her. She decided she wants to do something much more, and she believed in a miracle. She changed her job from being a waitress to a transportation industry which is dominated mostly by males. She learned everything she could, and when she started selling, something opened up for her, and very quickly she realized she does not have to spend the rest of her life as an executive assistant or as a salesperson. She could start her own company. She started a new gen transportation, which is now about $30 million in revenue. So she lives in Chicago area. So we have one person who has taken it from nothing to start an entrepreneurial startup, which is very successful. But she didn't stop there. She realized that there are lots of women like her who needs an extra hand. So she created a foundation called Expect a Miracle Foundation to support large number of women. And her way of doing is remarkable, and I'll let her talk about it in a few minutes. So thank you for being here, CAROLYN. And can I have, let's see who else is here. Meera Shenoy. You probably have seen some of the information about her in the brochure that has been sent. She is the 2012 Helen Keller Award winner, international award winner, and she has been working with disabled people, and she was a journalist before, and she decided, as she was working with some of the international organizations, wanted to make a difference to disabled. So she finds people who are disabled, gives them hope, goes to companies and makes a business case for how companies can benefit by hiring disabled, hires them and provides a kind of a counseling service between the companies and individuals so that both of them become successful. And she has served over, I think 3,500 last time I heard, 5,000? 5,600 now has been able to help. She also works with the Indian government to make sure all the laws and rules and all of them can be followed, so that when you do hire the disabled people, you will get some benefits, you will get other kinds of advantages, so that she has been working on both sides of the panel. So thank you for coming here, and appreciate you being on the panel. Thanks. I have Mark Gopin right here. Mark Gopin is a professor in George Mason University in Washington, D.C. And he works specifically on conflict resolution, not just conflict resolution in businesses. He started looking at conflict resolution in terms of religions and countries. So he worked for several years in the Middle East, focusing on the conflict resolution in a big areas. So if you are seeing many of the television shows, or if you talk about some of the public policies from the government on both sides, Republican and Democrat, if you want to know who gave some of their deep expert opinions, you're talking to the person who is sitting on the stage at this moment. In addition to doing that, he also started a social venture startup, because he found if you want to really make a difference to people who are conflicting, you create an opportunity where they can come together, talk among each other, just like Thai in some respects, but it is a short-term, purposeful, meaningful travel. So he created a travel company where he takes people from both sides and they take them to, for example, Israel and Palestine, and figure out a way where both sides of the party have got a business value that is to be created. while they are creating the business value, they find out their assumptions, beliefs, and some of the prejudices slowly melt away, because most conflicts happen not because of what is really happening, but what we think is the source of that happening. So he is able to do that for a large amount of time, and we're privileged to have you on the panel, Mark. And then we have Suzanne, where is Suzanne? Okay, there she is. Suzanne Ackerman. Suzanne Ackerman Burman comes from the Pick and Pay family, which is the Pick and Pay stores are one of the largest or the largest in South Africa, right? You have over 1,300 stores in South Africa, and her family has worked with various stores, and she is the transformation director, and she decided that the way in which you want to bring transformation is not just about what is going on within the company, but where do you get the supply chain? Where do you actually help other people who provide various kinds of supplies that they sell? How do you really add value to them? How do you enrich them, not just financially, but also culturally? Like just a few minutes ago when we were in Santa Clara University, she was telling a story of one of the suppliers that supplies to her organization, and how she took many of the African Americans to experience sushi. So she found by bridging the cultures, by helping people to learn things which they normally don't learn, by trusting and giving them something underneath, you connect not only with their passion, but also with their commitment. And she, I'm sure if you ask again, she will tell a beautiful story of how that gentleman whom Walmart promised, I'm not supposed to say, no, you're not supposed to say, I'm supposed to say, I can say, a large company which, starts with a W, I don't know which one it is, but they decided to take away that person and convince him to supply to all, to that company. Thank you. That company, and this person heard the pitch and talked about how he could be a millionaire and a billionaire by working with that company, but said, thank you very much, I don't want to work with you guys, because, do you develop people, and do you actually contribute to the culture and the nation? If you are able to do that, I'll work with you, but I have already an organization that is working with them. So in some respects, igniting the social innovation fires has got a lot more than establishing a business. To make an impact, how do you dig into it? We will have an opportunity to hear her, and as a matter of fact, we will also be launching, she will be showing a video that is made called Doing Good Business, on how some of it will be, how she has been practicing and her parents have been practicing and what they are doing in South Africa. Next, let's see, where is Victoria? Thank you and welcome. We have Victoria right here. Victoria is a very, very special person, because she actually started out a startup by using a cow. Of course, we all talk about holy cow. For her, that cow was the holiest part. As a matter of fact, she took that one cow that the husband has left behind and created an opportunity to serve over 15,000 women, and created an organization called Selfina, where she is making an enormous amount of contribution to empower women and men in Tanzania, and she has gotten all kinds of awards, from United Nations to World Economic Forum to state government to all kinds of things. So we are privileged to have you here. Thank you. Let's see, whom else I have forgotten? I have forgotten one more person.
Sandra.
I'm sorry?
Sandra.
Sandra, you. Sorry. Sandra, how can I forget you? She is my partner in crime. Where are you? Okay, right here. So, by the way, just to let you know, Sandra, CAROLYN, and myself, we were on the Fetzer Institute business advisory panel, and we had lots of fun finding these wonderful amplifiers who are doing magnificent work around the world. So, Sandra, please come up. Sandra Taylor is a person of a very different background. She worked with Starbucks at a very senior level, and she was on the board of Sara Lee, and many other companies, and she continues to work on how to bring sustainability. What does CSR mean to you? How do you have ethical practices? How do you really deal with employees who are in various parts of the world, and are they being treated fairly, appropriately, and not just policing, not just controlling, not just trying to curtail your business, but how to take that as an opportunity to brand yourself, build your market share, how to make a business case where CSR, ethics, sustainability could be the biggest advantage for you to make money, at the same time make an impact and make a difference. She works with that kind of companies, and she lives in Washington, but she looks like spends more time in Sonoma, not just to drink wine, but also help with the wine businesses to become much more sustainable. Is that fair? Thank you very much for coming. So, thank you. What we are going to do is, instead of just talking heads, as you know, each of you have got so much of passion, you have contributed a lot. So I want to get to know a little bit about who you are, what are some of your interests, and what are some other things, and then I'll get them to introduce themselves, and we can have it as a dialogue. So this becomes a two-way exchange where we can have a very meaningful contribution. So let me just check who is in the room. How many of you are active entrepreneurs at this time? Wow, majority of you. Thank you. How many of you are into your second entrepreneurial or third entrepreneurial startup? Okay, so there are quite a few of you here. Okay, how many of you are into investing, either venture or angel or some kind of investing? Okay, there are about half a dozen people here. How many of you are thinking of getting into entrepreneurship? You are into companies, big businesses, but you are actively thinking of doing something in entrepreneurship. There are quite a few people here. Okay, and professors, teachers, consultants. Okay, there are a few people there also, because we need capacity builders as much as well. All right, anybody else? Did I miss anybody? Is there anybody whom I have not acknowledged in anything? I'm sorry?
High-tech workers.
Okay, high-tech workers. No, let me check. Yeah, okay. Tech workers, are they also networkers? I'm sure, but we'll chat.
I'm an immigration lawyer. I don't know if that.
Perfect. Immigration lawyers. Okay, how about, welcome. Yeah.
Also a category.
I'm sorry?
Attorneys are a different category.
Attorneys are different category, and if your company has to go anywhere, you better respect them. Okay, how about somebody behind?
Also attorney.
Also attorney. Okay, good. Anybody else who do not feel like your category or who you are is not represented in the room? Okay, great, thank you. So let me check. What got you into this room? Why are you here? What do you want to learn from these people? Yeah, please.
I want to hear what's going on in Africa.
You want to know what is going on in Africa?
It's not well publicized
In the domain of entrepreneurship, I take it.
in the mainstream media.
In the mainstream media, it is not represented. You want to know what it is and how you can make a difference. Yeah, please.
I want to start a wellness-based social and entrepreneurial startup.
Okay, and you want to start that, and what do you want to learn? What is it that they can contribute to helping you?
I want to know how to connect the dots.
How to connect the dots? Okay, please.
I want to know from all of you that how do you measure the social impact in your work?
How to measure social impact. By the way, why I'm doing that is so that when they introduce themselves, they'll be beginning to talk a lot more about what you guys are saying. So that way, it becomes a genuine dialogue. So that makes it easier. Yeah, please.
So I'm more interested in kind of finding out how do you balance the social aspect versus the profitability aspect when you go take social entrepreneurship as opposed to the profit motive is my only goal. But how do you kind of balance these two?
Okay. Balancing the social and the financial aspects of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I also wanted to know, which you all talked about in the introduction, the win-win. How do you manage to win both? Generally, you'll have, it's a multi-sided area. You're probably trying to connect two people. How do you ensure the win-win for both? You know, because ultimately social entrepreneurship is about the win-win for that. So how do you all go about it in each of your organizations?
Okay. How to create win-win? Yes, sir.
How to reduce hunger by reducing the wastage of food on a global basis?
How to reduce hunger? And this is for question for them or question for you? I'm just checking. Question for them. Okay. If they can answer it, that will be good. Maybe they'll get even a Nobel Prize. Right. It's a difficult one, but it's an important one. That's good. But just, you have created an opportunity for next Nobel Prize. That's good. Let's see who will get it. Yes, Subhash.
Lottie is doing stuff in Africa, and I'm looking for doing the social entrepreneurship for people who want to start their own businesses in transportation.
Okay.
So it's a huge opportunity, and we're looking for people.
We're looking for people. Okay. So there is a way to connect. Yes, Padma.
From multiple ideas, how do you take one idea to fruition, and how do you take the first big step?
Okay. So as an entrepreneurial opportunity, you had lots of them. How do you pick one and stay with it till that becomes successful, right? So very good questions. Anything else? Yeah.
I'm interested in the sustainable development of cities.
Sustainable development of cities.
Yeah.
And how do you really, because social entrepreneurship is about cities, communities, nation, and people, right? Yeah.
I'm curious about their personal drivers.
Okay.
Here in Silicon Valley, we hear all about capitalists, venture capitalists, this capitalist, that capitalist.
Yeah.
What is the difference in you? What drives you?
Yeah, what drives you? What wakes you up in the morning and go to work in social entrepreneurial scenario? Yes, sir, you had a hand up.
Yeah. How do they sustain themselves, their business model?
Yeah, what is the way in which you can sustain yourself while you are making a contribution and making an impact to other people? What is your secret recipe? Yeah, please.
I want to know, if they got into what they are doing by accident, by choice, or...
Okay, so were you born or developed? Was it a discrete incident or is it a series of thoughts? How did you end up being? Because not everybody gets into it, especially you are talking to people in Silicon Valley where this is the birthplace of entrepreneurial spirit, right? So what made you become who you are? What turned you on, right? Yeah, please. Nandini?
How they use social networks, like we talk a lot about connecting with people, and how do they use it to be profitable?
Okay, so how do you use the networks to be profitable? Because everybody talks about networking. I'm sure there are quite a few people came here because they want to exchange business cards and network with people. Because that's a very important part of education, mentoring, and networking are three critical. But many people get the network, but once they get the network, they don't know how to leverage it. You can't just go and say, I met you there, I connect with you on LinkedIn, I want you to do this. No, things don't happen that way. But some of us are naive enough to think that that is the way to leverage the network. How do you really mine your network so that you can add value to them while they can add value to you? Yes, sir. What were your top 3 failures? So with that as the overall kind of interest that people have got, my sense is it is not that you can or will be able to address all of them, but when you tell your 3 minutes or 4 minutes introduction, as you do it, if you can begin to keep them in mind and tell some things, that would be very meaningful. So what we'll do is we'll go around, and once we go around the room, and then we will play Suzanne's the video that talks about her business a little bit.
If we've got time after all.
Yeah, no, we'll do that. And then, what you call, you don't know this group. This group, actually, once they stay on, it's like really committed. And if anybody can make a difference and anybody can make a money making a difference, that's the group which you have here. So, Thai and the people in here, some of them, they have contributed to more than 200 billion? Or, more than 200 billion now. $200 billion worth of revenues were generated by people who came to Thai and who started their own companies. So it's an amazing group of people here. That's why we didn't want to give a canned presentations to you. We wanted it to be something that connects with what brought you here, and this evening be something that you can take away and have a significant value. So thank you very much. So we will start. Who wants to start? Inni, mini, miny, mo. Catch the tiger? No. Okay, start from Sandra.
Okay.
Sure, please.
Well, as Prasad said, my background's very different. So I've been a corporate executive
and not so much an entrepreneur, although I have to say that a lot of people who have my role inside companies really are what we call entrepreneurs, and we're constantly pushing others inside the corporation to make decisions that are both socially relevant and socially valuable, and also a business success. So that's something that drives me to figure out how can I persuade an executive or a business manager who has goals already, who's been told to deliver a product at a certain price within a certain budget. How do I persuade them to either spend a little bit more money, to take some extra time to conduct their business in what I consider a socially responsible way or an environmentally sustainable way? And that's not always easy. But what I've done is I've tried to put myself in their place and to figure out and to make myself a business person, which is not always what people who do CSR, that's not always how they see themselves. Sometimes they proselytize, they think that they're activists inside the company. And with my teams and for myself, I've always tried to put myself in a business situation. I've been fortunate in that the CEOs that I've worked for have understood, it's been consumer companies, so Kodak and then Starbucks, so they understand how to translate and interpret a commitment to communities as an important element of the brand. So frequently, at least for consumer companies or consumer products, customers feel like they're doing something good by being a part of the product mix. So I've never hesitated to figure out how do we communicate to consumers the good things that we're doing. So if we're paying a little bit more for coffee, for example, or a little bit more for raw cocoa, how do we figure out a way to communicate that to consumers so that they feel like they're actually helping us do that? So that if they're paying a little bit more, in a way they're making a contribution to the lives of people who typically have a lot less than we do. The other thing that I always talk about is integrating sustainability into the business strategy and into the supply chain. So if I can persuade a client, because I'm a consultant, if I can persuade a client to look at its entire supply chain and to figure out where there are environmental or social impacts in their supply chain and how they can start to solve those, rather than corporate giving or having a foundation. And that's a little bit controversial because people they like giving, they think that's the way to be socially responsible. My feeling is if you look at your supply chain from start to end of life of the product and figure out what are the impacts you're having on the environment, on communities, on workers, and work to solve those, that you can have a huge impact socially and also financially. So barriers, one of the things I've learned is that it doesn't always work inside a corporation to be an activist. I mean, I've frequently sort of tried to make the case, make people feel guilty, make business managers feel guilty, or just basically say this is the right thing to do. And in fact, it challenges me to figure out why is this environmental position or social position good for our business.
Thank you.
Yeah, I come from Tanzania, like Mr. Prasad has said, and my work has evolved around economic empowerment of women. And there was a question on whether this comes as how did it develop? So my case developed because of a personal challenge that I felt. And with that experience, I came to think of that I might not be alone. There may be many other women who are facing similar challenges. And that put me on the roadmap to see what else I could do which could be more meaningful in my life. And I learned early during when I faced the challenges that when you face the challenges, it's better not to actually focus on that challenge, rather it's better to look at the positive opportunity that you may be having that can help you to go around the challenge, rather than looking at this immense problem. Most of the time you cannot solve it. And I'm talking about in sub-Saharan Africa, and maybe to be more specific, in my country, in Tanzania, we have traditional laws which normally favor male members of the clans. And in such situations, normally women find ourselves in a disadvantaged situation. And that actually makes it difficult for women to access finance, because normally those traditional laws make it favor the male members of the clan, especially when you are talking about inheritance or when you are talking about land rights. And when you don't have that, it makes it difficult to access finance when you go to the financial institutions. And yet, you look at the other side, you find we have very organized financial institutions, starting from the central bank to the commercial banks, which are collateral-based, and that's how they are structured. So when you can't break that, then what do you do? And for me, then I learned it's better I should look at what I have and better use that. And that thing was a cow. That's what Prasad said. And the cow was left behind by my late husband, and he had named the cow Sarah. That cow actually became my first productive asset. Why productive? Because I could sell milk and earn income, and I could actually feed the children with the milk. Therefore, the second lesson was that, how about the other women who do not have assets like that? And that led me to be compassionate about them, and I ended up pioneering leasing as a financial model in my country. And when I talk about leasing, I know you know about it, but coming from the field, I learned 3 important areas. One was that with the leasing, the asset that we are leasing is actually the collateral. It solves the problem of the collateral. So with the lease, it means we just go into the business. And the second one was that with the leasing model, then it means the women did not have to use their scarce resources to buy the asset, because they need the asset. But then if we buy it, it means they can use their resources as working capital, but they would have the asset already bought for them. And the third one was that at the end of the lease term, we pass the ownership to them, and they get to own something in their own names. It becomes their own property. And they use that to leverage further funding. And we've seen some of them outgrowing our financing, and they actually go to the financial institutions. So that has been an interesting part for me, because to see that you can support someone most of the time almost from zero, and then they would grow their businesses to levels that even the banks are now chasing them to give them financing, and they become business people. And more important, they also take part in productive economy in the country. If you don't do that, it means half of your people are not taking part in productive economy. So in any nation, if you can improve that, it means you change the matrix. And I can share with you maybe one or two stories. For instance, there was a lady who leased a freezer from us. With that freezer, she was able to make very good juice. She would take it to the market with a wheelbarrow, but she would freeze it. It will be fresh juice, very cool, coming from a tropical country, and then you take very cold, freshly prepared juice. Quickly, she became a very good businesswoman. People were really seeking to get her juice. And in the end, she was selling tea and whatever, and she got the hang of the food business. Before we knew it, she won a tender to save food at a cancer hospital in our country. Many people were coming now to her restaurant, the patients, the doctors, even the people around. And she was also getting to serve people who were doing conferences. Sometimes you'd have 2 or 3 conferences to service. And as I'm speaking today, now she manages 3 restaurants. And in a day, she can have even 9 conferences, starting from the one freezer. So that is an opportunity that you open up to the women. And there are many examples which I can give, but time is limited. But I should also say that we've been measuring impact of our work. For one, we are interested to see what they use the income that is generated for. And the outcome has been, we see that the majority of the money goes into paying for school fees for the children, which to me is very empowering because that's the young generation. So in a way, we are taking part in improving the education of our country. But some of the money goes into home improvement, paying for hospital bills. But equally important, they are also reinvesting in their businesses. And therefore, we've been seeing over time their businesses growing because of that reinvestment. And also, we've been checking the impact on job creation. Many of them are creating jobs for themselves, but also we've seen quite a number are employing 1 or 2 or 3 or even more. And when you see a person being employed, normally there are 4 or 5 people behind that person. So you see the multiplier effect of the little thing that you are doing. And there are other areas that we are also looking into. But I want to mention here that starting from the cow, I was happy to see that this work also ended up in taking part in a structural change in my country, in the sense that at a certain time we were picked by the radar of the International Finance Corporation, which is a member of the World Bank, and they were interested in promoting leasing in Africa, and they started in Tanzania. So when they came, they found we were doing leasing in our own way. So we worked with them, and to cut the story short, at the end of it, we agreed that the main challenge in promoting leasing there was that our country did not have a leasing law at that time. So they used our institution as a case study. They were looking at the difficulties, whatever that we were facing and all that. And at the end of the day, a leasing bill was taken to the parliament. And one day, for the first time, I found myself standing before the Parliament of the Republic of Tanzania, together with the leasing expert for the IFC for Africa and the leasing manager for the project in Tanzania. The 3 of us we were explaining to the decision makers, and 2 months later, a leasing law was passed. So that was, so thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us here.
Let me complete.
Yeah?
Okay. Please continue.
Okay. Mine's a completely different story. I was brought up as a South African. I am South African, born and raised in the depths of the apartheid years. And I was brought into a family who's third generation retailers, and brought up in a family who, with their heritage of being Jews, who'd been chased out of Germany and Russia 3 generations ago, had this inner sense that they couldn't tolerate inequality in any shape or form. So my parents, at the time when many people were leaving South Africa in the 60s because of the apartheid and the influence that was having on the community and population, decided to stay in South Africa and build an ethical business based on the rights of humanity and equality in an unethical society. And they did this by breaking every law in the book. And in those days, the apartheid rule book was literally a meter high. There were rules about anything. You couldn't marry a person of color. People of color were not allowed to hold money. People of color were not allowed to rise to superior positions, supervisory positions, management, weren't allowed to go to universities, weren't allowed to live in areas, everything. My parents broke every rule in the book and built a retail supermarket chain to 1,100 supermarkets with a market cap now of about 2.4 billion, 6.5 billion turnover, and over 60,000 employees. And with the change of the new dispensation 25 years ago now, when Mandela was freed, we looked at this, and I thought, I was wrecked with guilt as a child, and someone asked what was the motivation, and I hated inequality, and I left the country because I thought I was going to get into trouble. I was thrown into a police car one day because I held a Free Nelson Mandela sign at university, and it was great to be a rebelling young student, but I realized I'm not going to do anything, so I left the country, started a new life overseas. But you could take South Africa out of the girl, but you can't take the girl out of South Africa, and I thought, I've got to go back. And the only way I could go back and make an impact is not carry on with the fear that I had and the guilt that I had of being a wealthy, white, well-educated, Jewish business person. What can I do with the skills, with my heritage and the history that I've learned, and make a difference in the country? And how do I make the essence and the legacy of my parents more relevant today, because we now have a democracy? So I decided to look at the supply chain and realize the huge indiscretion that there is. And 80% of the supply chain around the world that supplies retail is dominated by a handful of multinationals. About 20 major multinationals around the world control the purse strings of retail or of the consumer industry. So let's forget that, because I'm not going to change them. I do try, and if there's some of you here today, I'll have a go at you as well. We do try, because there's a way to do things. So I looked at the other percentage. How do we provide access to the supply chain for previously disadvantaged people? There are millions of them, millions of entrepreneurs out there, and they don't have the ability to get into a foothold into the so-called big companies. So I made it my mission. I called myself Director of Transformation. No one said anything because I was the boss's daughter, so that did help. But I thought, that's it. I've got a big mouth. I'm going to do something with it. And I started trying to change the way our buyers think, our executives think, how the business world thinks. That young lady who started selling spinach to 3 or 4 of our supermarkets can actually be a major national supplier. So to date, I have about 95 small businesses, farmers, and communities in my small business incubator. And I measure the success. We measure the success, and actually it's very easy, by what their turnover is, how do they grow, how do they meet their targets, are they living up to their expectations, are they fully compliant with their health, hygiene, safety auditing, their supply chain auditing? And we have to provide the education to all those aspects to ensure their sustainability. And then finally, look at how many jobs have been created. And in total, in the Small Business Incubator we've created over 15,000 jobs. And also the multiplying factor that Victoria was talking about. In South Africa, we look at about 10 mouths for one job. That's how many people are impacted. And it's just growing. There have been failures, and the failures, sadly, are the ones, and I put it down to two things: greed and lack of education. Unfortunately, people see money and they don't understand the value of money, and it's used for the wrong things: the fancy cars, the expensive shoes, and not reinvested into the business. And unfortunately, the lack of education and the lack of the ability to conceive or to conceptualize change and challenges and learn that you can actually learn from these mistakes. Because unfortunately in Africa, failure is a luxury. You cannot afford to fail because the heritage says it's going to perpetuate the cycle of poverty. So if you have the ability to break that and appreciate you can break that, then the world's the oyster. So I'm never leaving the country, and I'll continue to help grow entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. Mine is very, very different story as well. Our company just began just a few years ago, and it's a tourism company. And there are 1 billion people who travel every year now to the other 7 billion, the other 6 billion in the world. So it's a massive, massive global industry. And we developed an opportunity to create a niche within tourism, which has been variously called ecotourism or meaningful tourism or purpose-driven tourism. And we did it to solve a problem, really. We didn't do it at the beginning to become wealthy, but it ended up generating results that we were astonished by. So that within the first year, we managed to put $1 million into a local economy based on $10,000 infused by each tour. National Geographic is our major corporate client. And as we brought them into Israel and Palestine, we based it on a couple of simple principles. Each tour would have two narratives in it from the two communities. Each tour would be based on fair wages from everybody from the taxi driver to the bus driver. Each tour would invest in speakers and guides that had been starving peacemakers and change makers. And they would each get a piece of the action. And so that process of bringing the wealth of tourism, but redirecting it from the bottom up, revolutionized what was going on the ground. Because millions and millions and millions of dollars had been wasted and are wasted all over the world by diplomats and governments when they give the money to the wrong people from the top down, that actually makes conflicts much worse. Because when we discovered that, we realized that the smallest ingredients at the bottom that were based on equality and based on nurturing families on both sides that would benefit from the commerce would revolutionize relationships based on empathy, based on shared values, based on the sense of equality and dignity. And so for the first year, we had 100% growth. The second year, we had 50% growth. And we keep on going up and up, about 20%. Our biggest challenges are that, I didn't start out this way. I resisted capitalism until my 50s. I was a professor. I didn't really believe in this model of social change. But as I read more deeply into my background in philosophy and religion and culture, I started to realize that commerce has always been one of the most reliable forms of peace building in the world. And it's been, the problem we've had is that that Wall Street is really a betrayal of the Adam Smith vision of how commerce would really revolutionize history with compassion. It's all in Adam Smith's famous writings. And this was a bastardization of the capitalist model that then communism took advantage of, and fascism, etc. And we're trying to restore the original capitalist model is that capitalism works when it's based on equality, compassion, and dignity. And this has been a very exciting model. We had disappointments. We lost 1/3 of our business in the Gaza war, and we had to recoup and scramble. War is a very vulnerable thing when you're dealing with two communities, and that's why we think this is a global model, and that the rest of the globe that's safer can help balance the kind of work that you do in tourism in more risky areas. So we're looking to expand greatly because there are so many global communities that could be enriched if communities could work together and all benefit from tourism in an equal way. And that's the excitement of the model at this point. The biggest challenge, however, is that at this point, we've infused thousands and thousands of dollars to lots of poor families and lots of change makers. We're still looking to make a major profit as a company. We have some salaries. We have 40 people employed, which is astonishing to me. And at the same time, but it sounds like very small numbers, but the other thing to remember is that when you're dealing with communities in conflict, you have to think of the biological model. And the biological model is that you can't throw medicine at a sick body. It just makes it sicker. You have to find the key molecule that's healthy, the key cancer cure, and then infuse it into the system. And we find that in the equal relationship with people across lines. So our business is equally owned by Jews and Palestinians in this particular case, three members. And we're working mostly at this point, I'm a full-time professor, so I don't take a salary. We're looking to demonstrate profitability to this as we gather corporate clients, to demonstrate that this is sustainable, not just for all the people on the ground as a new form of peace building that the diplomats have failed at, but at the same time, sustainable for the owners and sustainable for those. That's where we're still looking and searching and looking to learn from the commercial community as to how to grow with a model that's very successful, but to make it successful for rather idealistic owners that put everybody else first. So that's the positive and also the challenge, and thank you very much.
Hi, my tale is also different. I worked first in the private sector, then moved on to business, journalism, both print and television. Quite often I would go to the villages to look at the interesting innovations, especially in IT, and in India, there are a lot of innovations happening over there. I reached a point where I knew that I just wanted to do something in this field, but didn't quite know what. I have a great belief that when the urge is strong enough, the circumstances which push you towards that. I think my urge was strong enough, and there was a large World Bank project then. It was a poverty project, one of the largest global existing in India. So they asked me whether I'd come and head an area called Corporate Sector Partnerships with the Poor. I really didn't know what it was, but I thought this was my opportunity. So I jumped into that. In that 1 year, when I did a couple of initiatives of trying to find the win-win between the private sector and the communities of the poor, I did some interesting models. But one area where some of the pilots which I did showed promise was my work with youth. And by then, I'd also figured out what I really wanted to do. One is I wanted to work with youth, because if you work with youth, then you're really working at a time when later they can fly off on their own. And second is I was also very clear I wanted to work on jobs, because that gives them certainty in life. You put them in the first job and then again they can fly off on their own, and a job in the organized sector. At that time, the government invited me to set up the first state government employment mission for the rural and tribal poor. And that experience was really wonderful because there was nothing like this across the country. I could innovate. There were no cut and paste models. I used my private sector experience to see how rural and tribal poor can actually fit into the entry-level organized sector jobs. When I left it, I'd set up 200 centers across the state, and most of them were getting jobs. I put in a transaction-based IT architecture to pick up the data. It was one of the most transparent jobs mission. So people called me at this point of my life a social entrepreneur with government money, because as most of you are from India, you know most of the government work is not outcome oriented. But that's exactly what I did. I made sure I had this lovely budget with me, and I made sure that it was outcome oriented. And in fact, this set the tempo for the rest of the state employment missions of the country today. After that, when I left it, we set up Youth for Jobs. And this time we thought we should work with the more vulnerable. And the problem is large enough in India, that's young men and women with disability. Well, it was a tremendous challenge because we really didn't think it was so difficult. We had worked for 10 years with non-disabled youth, and therefore we thought that we can crack this area too. The biggest challenge for us was actually mindsets. It's tremendous, the mindsets on all sides, because we work mainly with the rural youth, let me say, because I believe India is the villages, and if you don't work with the rural youth, then actually you really can't make an impact and scale. So we began with the rural youth. The youth have very low self-esteem and believe that they can't get jobs, especially if it's girls, and 40% of who we train are girls. Companies had mindsets. So it was, cants on all sides, and we worked slowly, filling every gap with both our decade-long knowledge and deepening our understanding of disability. We did a lot of studies in various areas, brought on a lot of partners, created a platform where we can get government on board, companies on board, and the rural communities on board. Set up 16 centers across the country, 3 years young, but we are one of the largest in this space now. We've trained about 5,600 youth with disability. It's locomotor disability, hearing impaired, and those with low vision. 70% of them are in jobs and 40% are girls, which keeps us happy. What is the win-win? I think the win-win here is, especially now with the new government, one is, of course, skill for India. And if you don't do the unreached and the vulnerable pockets, our demographic dividend will never be met. Second is made for India. Youth with disability have 15% more productivity than the non-disabled youth. So definitely, and a lot of companies who we work with in the manufacturing sector, clearly our third-party studies show this. Last but not the least, I think the UN MDG goals, unless you reach the unreached, the goals cannot be met. All studies have shown that. So that's us.
Well, if their stories were different, mine's really different. I was a waitress for many years, for 10 years at the Hyatt Regency O'Hare in Chicago. I did not go to college. I came from a family that all my siblings went to college, but I didn't want to go. I really just wanted to be married and have a lot of kids. I was raised from a nice Catholic family. And I got a job as a waitress. And I had that job for 10 years. And I desperately, after 10 years, wanted to get out, and I was unqualified. But I had a belief system that was strong enough that told me that I could do more. And eventually I got a job in a trucking company. And as Prasad said, I begged and pleaded. And when I did get the job, by the way, the man who hired me said, "I'll give you this job if you do me one favor. You will never, ever ask to be more than a customer service rep." And I said, okay. And years ago, they could do that. And I was there a couple months later, and I just said, you got to put me in sales. And eventually they did. And I went out there into the world of sales and transportation, and I did very well, as I knew I would. I had taken everything that I learned as a waitress and became a CEO. In fact, I even wrote a book, and that's the title of the book. Everything I know as a CEO, I learned as a waitress. And I used those same principles as I started my own company. And I started my own company in the dining room of my townhome, without a business plan, without a loan, without any knowledge whatsoever how to run a company. But again, I had a belief system, and I had a lot of customers that believed in me. I learned how to build relationships, which today is absolutely the number one thing I could ever tell anybody. It's your relationships and your belief in yourself that will take you to where you're going to go. And as my business, year after year after year, it just kept doing better and better and better and better and better. And finally, I knew that there was a purpose for it. And I think it's a purpose for all of us here in this room, that when we're doing well, I think we need to step back and say, is it really because of us? Is it really because of something wonderful that we created, or is it for a bigger purpose? So I started the Expect a Miracle Foundation based on being a single mom, how difficult it was finding the money to pay for extracurricular activities for children of single parents. And I think everybody here in this room is somehow touched by somebody who is either a child of a single parent or even raised by a single parent. And you know how difficult that is. So for the past 14 years, we've been able to help over 7,000 children achieve their dreams of playing baseball, playing basketball, playing a cello, cheerleading, all the things that maybe everybody in this room might take for granted, but it is really building the self-esteem of our next generation. So when does it ever end? I think it ends the day we die. And we can't take any of it with us. We can't take those $500 billion, right? I mean, we can't take it with us. But what can we take with us? We can take with us who we loved, who we helped, who we cared for, and how we made the world a better place. So I thank you.
By the way, one of the reasons why we got them here is because Fetzer Institute, we have a gentleman here, Sharif Azami. He is the program. Can you stand up for a minute so that they can see you? They are looking around. He is the program officer, and we have another person, Jennifer Barr, who has been helping us to do this. And what the Fetzer Institute wanted to do was find opportunities around the world where such wonderful stories being told, such wonderful contributions being made, if we can amplify it and find what are the positive forces, what are the kinds of passions, love and forgiveness that people bring that allows for them to ignite and spread by themselves. So how do we magnify that, amplify that, and let other people hear the stories? So because of that, we brought all of them here, and they're all going to be speakers in the TEDx Berkeley, which will happen Saturday. And you can't go in there right now because the seats are filled, but you can get on the live stream if any of you want to follow up any of these people and listen to some of their talks. I needed to say that because with the time that we have, we might not be able to answer all your questions. But if you want to follow that up, if you want to get to know more about them, check that out. That is one thing. So now, let me take some questions. And we can try to take.
By the way.
I'm sorry?
Free live stream.
It's a free live streaming. So
schedules on the website.
Yeah, TEDxberkeley.org. Right? All right. So let me take some questions and comments for any of them to address that. Yeah, please.
So 2 questions. My original question that I asked, how do you balance the social versus the commercial interest?
Who wants to take that? Yeah, please.
Yes, thank you. I meant to, but there was so much going on in my mind. It's a very strict metrics because we have a purchasing division who has to meet certain targets. And we've set a percentage of the targets to be small businesses. And each small business, it has to be economically viable. It doesn't make commercial sense. Although one is in business to make profit, the way you do it with a conscience is what's going to distinguish you from the opposition. And business is not only about maximization of profit alone. So we set matrices, we set targets of how many small companies we must get in each category, what their turnover needs to be, how they move through the incubator from a small and medium to a large company, small, medium, large company. And if it's not making business sense for us, then we relook at it, reinvest more skills. We don't just exclude them. We'll actually put more resources to ensure that they become profitable. So we don't pay for the resources. We have the expertise in our company. And 60,000 employees, we have experts from architects to engineers to technologists, you name it, we've got them, even lawyers, funny enough. So we put them onto the business, we identify the needs and challenges and make it work. We don't just leave anyone by the wayside.
How many of these companies grow from the so-called small, they've been qualified for your assistance versus now they don't need?
They never want to leave. We're trying to kick many of them out of the incubator, but they won't leave. But they become mentors, and they are never asked to be paid back. We do some capital funding. We put some seed capital towards them if they require it. And then we don't want it, it's interest-free loans. We ask them to pay it forward to become mentors to the next small ones that are coming into the business. So we've actually grown probably about 20% now, are over 15, 20 million turnover a month. Some of them start at 150 Rand income, which is really very small, selling 3 packets of biscuits in one supermarket. And our systems, although incredibly complicated, can manage those 1 or 2 small ones. And it doesn't cost us much to do free distribution, free transportation, and we utilize entrepreneurial transporters to help in that supply chain as well. So at every aspect of the business, we try and incorporate young entrepreneurs.
Very small, on a very, very small scale in terms of a startup. I think it became more of a moral commitment, which my PhD was in philosophy, and it came out of moral philosophy. Self-love is the first principle in a lot of ethical systems. And we made that a principle of our relationships of anybody who was part of our company. And that is that we, at any point in time, if somebody wasn't getting enough from the company, we helped to find them other means of making a living. So that we were concerned about the total organic effect of what we were trying to do as a social enterprise and as a business. So sometimes we could make more money, sometimes we had to help people find money in other ways. But the commitment was to the people, unless they really couldn't cut it in terms of their performance, which then we had to go to the client, what was in the best interest of the clients. So the professional standards had to stay in terms of the product, but at the same time, in terms of our personal welfare, we're always balancing to what degree we would be idealistic, but bottom line, everybody had to be able to survive. And that was a commitment of the group. So I don't know whether that's a good model for as you scale up, but right now it's working as an organic model of commitment.
I have a question for Meera. So it's very commanding to focus on the disability sector, and especially you have given the employments to lifelong employments of so many young people. However, if you look at the number scale, in India, out of 500 million, 400 million are in unorganized sector, 70 million are in disability sector, which is what we are focusing on. And there is a very fraction of that really is employable. So what would be your 2-3 points where you think is the most important thing for individuals like us and the country to focus on to bring that awareness and improve that situation?
I think one is that definitely a lot of efforts have to be put into advocacy, into change of mindsets. Mindsets both in the rural areas to convince them that their children with disability are actually employable, and at the company's end, and even within the governments. For example, till I did the ILO paper of PWDs and the labor markets, the government officers themselves who were responsible for employment were not doing anything. They didn't believe that youth with disability can be employed, because always the government's tone was subsidies for pensions, giving them various other props, which are important, but I think we also need to understand that they have abilities which can lead to employment. So that I think is number one. Number two, of course, some of these issues now the new government is thinking about, I must tell you. The number two is the kind of incentives which are given to the companies. One needs to look at them in a different way, which now they are thinking about. Number three, I think, is that good institutions should come into this, because at present there are very few organizations which work in this very difficult field. I think more organizations need to come. And then you'll get role models. For example, we ourselves, we have a lot of case studies which we're constantly sharing with the government so that everyone, the whole ecosphere changes. I think the question is that how do you bring change in the ecosphere? So that would be one first big phase. I think second is the area which now I plan to begin working from next year. I think we need to do a backward integration. At present, if you look at the youth, one of the biggest problems of disability is only 2% are educated. So if you have a very low education level, then what happens is that at some point or the other, career progression gets halted. Because in careers, at some point, they look for education, even in the manufacturing sector. So at present, you can get them entry-level jobs, But for the next jump to happen, education is very important. So I'm hoping when I go back, I'll do some business plan, get some funds, and start tab labs in special schools so that we can, at least the next generation, you leave behind more educated disabled who can therefore get better, they'll be more employable. That's the idea.
Please.
To the professor with the Jewish Palestinian Travel Company, one of the things he didn't say is that every synagogue, every Jewish community center, and many Catholic churches have trips to Israel / the Holy Land. Two-part question. What differentiates your trips, and what is your real hidden social agenda to combine Palestinians and Jewish to make these journeys? Which I have never heard before, and it's very, very interesting.
Okay, well, there's not a hidden agenda. It's all over our brochures and everything. I mean, it's the.
You seem to be very unique, and you've got a lot of competition.
Yeah, I know I am, but there's actually thousands of people who've been doing this in a nonprofit sense, and the trajectory of where we come from is that I worked on this for 30 years as a nonprofit person, and so have thousands of Jews and Palestinians, and in many other conflicts in the world. I come from a subculture globally of tens of thousands of people who work tirelessly on peace and burn out of poverty and out of neglect and out of governments not caring about us or even being against us. So we are unique in that we move to the for-profit model as an escape from the misery and the burnout of nonprofit work. The agenda is very clear. The agenda is equality and nonviolence. We don't have an agenda in terms of one state or two states. We're interested in building relationships because the scientific evidence is clear that the more relationships there are, the critical mass of at least 10% of people will have a clear vision of a future together through empathy, compassion, equality, and nonviolence. They start to shift cultures in a very different direction, especially when their families are invested in it. So our agenda is to create that critical mass of social network people asked before, and then that become a critical mass that starts to shift policy, especially in people who are younger than 40, who don't have the same prejudices and traumas that the people of the older generation have. There is a very large group that goes to the Holy Land all over. National Geographic invested in us because of our quality, despite our extreme youth and our extreme lack of scaling up that most of the major tourism companies have, because they believed in the vision. They believed in the vision of the two communities living together. Many, many churches come with us. Some synagogues come with us. And the agenda is very clear. There are many, many Christians, very devout, many, many Jews, who are not happy with the constant state of war and hatred. And they're looking for a different experience of the Holy Land. We have tours to other parts of the world, Ireland and other places, where we're also looking for that meaningful niche of people who are not happy with an adversarial approach to other ethnic groups.
You're trying to promote world peace.
Exactly. But we want to do it and make a bundle of money for everyone in the process of doing it. We want to shift wealth towards it being good for peace. And in fact, most wealth in the world does benefit from peace. And there's a very small sector that actually benefits from war. And it's a matter of becoming conscious of that and having those people who benefit invest much more aggressively in binding people together through a very people-centered industry like tourism to become part of the solution. We believe that companies and corporations can all be part of that.
Any questions for Victoria or Sandra or Carolyn? Yeah, you want to do the next.
For Victoria,
please.
It's very commendable that. I can speak.
It's okay.
As a kid, I was speaking only at the age of 3. Now, when I speak very loudly. So my question was, I can speak with the mic also. My question was to Victoria. You were talking about the women oppression and the laws in Tanzania favoring the men and this. So after your venture, my question is, how do the men start behaving with the women? because they were socially empowered. Even in India, we have the same issue. Women are better in financial management, and especially the men. This and how did the parliament take? Is it still? Do you see a change in the approach, or is it still the society has changed, or you think there's incremental thing because of the economy, the family with the women providing it?
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe one thing I should make clear, the written laws of the country are very good. They are not biased, they are very clear for men and women. So the country has no problem with that. But back to the question now, what we do in our work, we don't want to say we want to make women better than men. So we, right from the start, we sit down with the women. We do training in gender issues, we do training in different areas as well. But the first one is to make sure that they understand the thing is not trying to change the matrix in the society. So we also, at one point, we also bring the men to our offices, especially the husbands. So we talk through with them about what this is all about. Your wife wants to lease this machine for a business, and we believe it will be good for your family. And if you can support her, then that will be good for the family. So it's a process, and our experience has shown that for families that actually work together, you find very good results. They really do well, and even their businesses grow even better. So that is what we've been aspiring, and we've seen very little situations where our work has led to aggressiveness or any disruption in the family matrix. So what I can say is actually like a normal curve where you see there are some who are extra good, as a family. They're super good, they do together, and you see really they power the business up. And then there are some who are not really that good. We've had maybe a few cases where a woman would come and say, I borrowed from you, and I was raising maybe broiler chicken, and they reached a point of sale, and I was at work, and I come back home, all the beds have been sold, and I was feeling happy that, okay, daddy today found the market and he sold, only to realize the money he sold, he got the money, but then he took the money elsewhere. So such things happen sometimes in the society. So sometimes we do the counseling or whatever and try to see how we can get out of that. We've had a situation where maybe a husband just divorces the wife for no reason and says, you did not come with anything into this marriage. But then the divorced wife would come to us and say, this is what happened. Would photocopy the file that we did for her. They would take it to the court, and she would get the freezer or the fridge that was taken away from her, and she would start her business elsewhere. So those are the other extremes, but the majority we've seen, it brings the family together, and you see even the children taking part in the business.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll take one more question and then we'll play the video for a few minutes, please. Yeah. Yeah. Please.
Probably a very personal question for Victoria. You seem to be more passionate talking about business and economy. May I ask, what is your educational qualification?
Thank you very much. I'm a veterinarian.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you know how to deal with people very well. All right. Any other questions for other panelists? Anything else? In the meantime, they'll set up the video. We will see a small video of how the business is done, and based on some of the work Suzanne has been doing. We'll set that up. Yeah, please.
How can others contribute to your efforts? Part one, and part two, how can your ideas be applied to other areas or communities?
So, are you asking any specific people?
Everyone as to how their ideas are applicable to other communities.
Sure. We'll try to take some of the people who have not said anything yet. And then, so Sandra, you want to say something? Or CAROLYN, or anybody else for that matter? Suzanne?
What was the first question?
How can others contribute to your efforts?
How can other people join in?
That's why I asked you to repeat it. I think that's the best news I've heard. I think you have two incredible women here who would really benefit of, what was the figure we spoke about in the beginning? 200 billion or something? Africa needs your money, friends. No, but I think to us it would be the greatest compliment if, well, thank you for listening to all of us, but if maybe just one idea sparked the softest form of compassion to your fellow employees, to the community you're trying to serve, just go out there and make a difference. It's not about making money, and everybody can do it. And many of us come from similar environments, Africa, India, the impoverished countries, they need compassion, and that's what's going to change the world. And big business can play a huge role in that.
Are we taking the funds for these ladies?
We'd love to develop destinations all over the world that could benefit from social healing and economic development across ethnic lines, and we'd love help in developing those destinations. So that would be wonderful.
My only request is that you think about love and compassion and forgiveness when you're making business strategy. And that sounds kind of odd and strange to some business executives, but how do you make the business case for being compassionate and being socially responsible? Because I think they can be. So what's your commitment to your employees? How do you create motivated and satisfied and energized employees? How do you create customer loyalty? And how can social responsibility and compassion help to create compassionate, loyal customers? Then what about your license to operate, depending on the nature of your business? How do you create goodwill within communities? I think that it's possible to integrate social responsibility, love, and compassion in making your business strategy. But it's always about what's the business case for doing that, and why would investing in these kinds of things help you be a successful business?
I would also add one quick point that actually I came prepared to talk about a particular case on something called a Women's Bank of Sri Lanka, Women's Cooperative, which started out 25 years ago with one dockyard worker believing that the only way in which they can make a difference in Sri Lanka is to get various people at the poorest of the poor to save 5 Sri Lankan rupees a week, and using a cooperative movement to make something. They are now, I went to their 25th anniversary, there are 85,000 women who are part of this women's cooperative. They have saved 5 billion rupees, and they have a complete model which is very different from microcredit and various microfinance organizations which have become very unsuccessful. These people have a 100% return rate on loans, and it is wherever they go, they have prosperity, the community violence reduces, people become much more peaceful because they are able to work with. There is funding for education, funerals, incidental expenses, healthcare, insurance, all kinds of things, and all of them are run by these uneducated poor women. By the way, my biggest problem when Fedzer asked me to really explore this, as I was researching, I went twice. We couldn't get a proposal from them to get funded because there was only one person in the entire community who could speak English. And the president of that particular 85,000 people women's cooperative, she doesn't know how to speak English, and she makes 8,000 Sri Lankan rupees. And if I were to show you a photograph, you would have seen she had the award given by Secretary Hillary Clinton that was on the floor. But all the things they are doing in women's cooperative are all on the front. It's like there are several amazing stuff that's going on in the world regarding how to make a difference, how to collaborate, and how we can help each other to go forward. So there is a lot that can be learned from this. Because I'm more of a researcher and a professor and a consultant, I gather some of these points from there, but you're hearing from real people who have done it. Sharif, you had a comment which you want to make.
I just wanted to shed some light on this documentary that we're going to screen right now. I've been working with Suzanne and a team, and this is the second time it's going to be screened today. It's yesterday, I think we screened it for the first time to the Aspen Fellows in San Francisco. So today is just the second day, and it's not even officially yet released, to be released. And we worked on it for the last 1 year. It's about the Ackerman's family, what they did in South Africa in terms of business, and the struggle, really, of her father, and the incredible work that he has done. So I think it's a testimony to that, and it also has some context of the apartheid in South Africa. So we've received really good feedback, and I think you're going to enjoy it. I just thought I should shed some light on what it is and why we wanted to share it with you tonight. Thank you.
Anything you want to say to set that video in context from your perspective, Suzanne? So they'll be ready to watch it.
No, we were really very touched that you selected us out of the entire world to tell the story. I just want to end with one statement. I firmly believe that the responsibility of wealth is to leave the world a better place, environmentally, socially, and financially, economically.